6 meats. In 1 month, the price tags twisted hard enough to make shoppers stop in their tracks. The jump wasn't quiet. It hit suddenly, showing up in grocery bills and restaurant menus before anyone had time to blink. Shoppers walked in expecting the usual and walked out asking what just happened. This isn't the kind of slow creep we've seen in past years. It's sharp, it's unsettling, and it has roots that stretch from trade wars to weather disasters. Behind every spike sits a mix of tariffs, border shutdowns, and shrinking herds forces that feel far away until they land right in your kitchen. We'll tell you which meats were caught in the crossfire, why your bill is rising so fast, and what could be waiting around the corner. Because the scariest part isn't the number you saw on the receipt this week, it's the shock still hiding in next week's cart. The big picture of tariff. Before we step into the meat aisle, let's pause to understand tariffs and how they shape the prices we all face. A tariff is simply a fee added when goods cross a border. On paper, it looks like trade policy. In practice, it works like an extra cost that flows through the system until it reaches the grocery shelf. Importers pay more, distributors adjust, and before long, the price tag in front of you has shifted upward. Over the past year, tariffs on food have been making headlines. A new 50% charge was placed on certain beef imports from Brazil. Earlier, a 10% tariff was applied to a wide range of goods from Australia, including major food products. And while not always called tariffs, stricter border checks on livestock from Mexico created the same effect: tighter supply and higher costs. These changes aren't just numbers in government filings. They act as levers on the market. When tariffs rise, they raise the floor under prices, and the ripple reaches every shopper faster than most expect. That's the link. Tariffs may start as trade tools, but they end up stamped on everyday receipts. And that connection is key to understanding why the meat aisle feels different right now. Now that the picture is clearer, let's step into the aisle and uncover the first cut of meat, feeling the full weight of these changes. Number 1. Beef? You must have figured it out. That's right, beef. Prices did not tiptoe up. They jumped. Ground beef set fresh records this summer, pushing past $6 a pound in many stores. Steaks that felt like a treat now feel out of reach. Even simple weeknight chili costs more than it did not long ago. For folks on fixed incomes, every extra dollar at the register bites. It is not your imagination. The meat aisle has changed. Here is the hard part. The squeeze is not coming from one place. It is a stack of pressures landing all at once. The United States entered late summer with one of the smallest cattle herds in many decades. Years of drought and high feed costs trimmed herds, and fewer animals mean tighter supply. On top of that came new trade moves. In early August, the government put a fresh tariff on certain beef coming from Brazil. In the spring, a baseline tariff on Australian goods returned, and that country is a key source of lean beef used for ground blends here at home. Border checks on cattle from Mexico tightened this year as well. That is not a tariff by name, but it can pinch supply in a similar way. Think of a tariff like a toll at a bridge. The truck pays the fee to cross, but the cost does not stop with the truck. It is added to the box, then to the pallet, then to the invoice, and finally to the sticker on the shelf. Importers pay more. Packers and processors adjust their bids. Distributors pass it along. Grocers do the math and raise the price. That pass-through does not take years. Often it shows up within weeks, especially when supply is already tight. That is how a number in a policy memo turns into a higher price for a pound of beef at your local store. You feel it most in the small choices. You reach for the family pack and switch to a smaller tray. You scan the sale tags and find fewer of them. Maybe you swap steaks for stew meat. Maybe you put a package back and tell yourself you will stretch what you already have in the freezer. If that is you, you are not alone. You're not doing anything wrong. The system shifted under your feet. Let's keep this clear and fair. Not every cut is hit the same way. Some weeks bring a good promotion. Restaurants may trim portions or rotate to different cuts to hold the line for regulars. And yes, many ranchers want a chance to compete and stay in business. Tariffs are often explained as a way to protect them. The goal and the outcome can both be true at once. Support for producers on one side, higher prices for shoppers on the other. That tension is real, and it shows up in the cart. Here's what matters for the next trip to the store. Watch the weekly ads, but also watch the pattern. If the price of ground beef at your shop stays high even when a sale ends, that is pass-through at work. If a new shipment lands and the tag inches up again, that is the pipeline clearing at the new cost. It is not a moral failing. It is how markets work when supply is tight and tariffs raise the base. We leave you with one more thing to think about. Beef may be the headline today, but the same levers do not stop at one cooler. They nudge the case right next to it. They touch the cuts folks turn to when beef gets too pricey. Which meat do you think is already catching that ripple, and how soon before its price tag tells the same story? Number 2. Lamb. There was a time when lamb chops sat right beside pork chops in the butcher's case. Today, that same cut feels like it belongs in a luxury shop. The story of lamb is not only about taste or tradition, it is about a system that stretches across oceans, trade offices, and supermarket shelves. Unlike beef, America produces only a sliver of the lamb it consumes. Most of it comes from Australia and New Zealand. That means when policy shifts at the border, the ripple lands directly on American tables. In April, the United States reinstated a baseline tariff of 10% on a wide range of Australian goods. That included lamb. It may sound small compared to the headline-grabbing numbers on other products, but for an item that already relies heavily on imports, even a modest increase magnifies through the chain. Importers faced higher invoices. Distributors raised quotes. Grocers adjusted shelf tags. By early summer, reports from the Economic Research Service showed lamb prices jumping sharply enough that forecasts for the rest of the year had to be revised upward. This is where the system reveals its weight. Lamb does not have a deep domestic buffer. America's own flocks are small and shrinking, the legacy of decades where lamb consumption fell while beef and chicken rose. That leaves the country dependent on supply lines from across the Pacific. When tariffs land on those routes, there is little insulation. The added cost runs straight into the market, and tariffs are not the only lever. Shipping times, exchange rates, and seasonal demand all play their part. But tariffs are different in one key way: they are deliberate. They are written, voted, and signed into existence. They are choices. For some, they are explained as protection for American sheep producers who struggle to compete with larger operations overseas. For others, they look like bargaining chips in a much wider trade game, where lamb is one card on the table alongside steel, energy, or technology. It is here that whispers of hidden motives find fertile ground. Was lamb included to shield a struggling sector, or was it folded in as part of a bigger trade package where food serves as leverage? Is the extra cost at the register a side effect, or was it always understood as the trade-off? These questions circle quietly because the paper trail is clear, but the intent is harder to pin down. What cannot be denied is the outcome: Americans are paying more for lamb in 2025, and tariffs are part of the reason. For families who still set lamb at the center of a holiday table, that shift hurts. A dish once tied to Easter or Sunday gatherings now feels out of reach. Restaurants that serve lamb as a specialty have to rewrite menus, sometimes raising prices, sometimes dropping dishes altogether. The system at play does not just touch economics. It changes culture, shrinking the presence of a meat that once carried deep tradition. Supporters of tariffs argue that they keep American producers alive, giving local farms a chance against massive export operations abroad. Critics counter that the numbers are too small to justify the cost to consumers. Both sides point to the same figures and draw different conclusions. That tension is baked into the system, and lamb sits right in the middle of it. So lamb is no longer just about taste or tradition. It's a reminder that the price tag in front of us isn't always set by supply and demand alone. Sometimes it's shaped by choices made far away, choices that ripple straight into our kitchens. And the hardest part, once those choices are written into law, it's the shopper, not the policymaker, who pays the bill. Number 3, pork. You might think pork was safe. No headline-grabbing tariffs, no border standoffs. But here's the twist: even without a direct hit, pork has been caught in the storm. And this summer, the proof showed up right where families feel it most, in the price of bacon chops and ham. In July, retail pork touched around $5 a pound, the highest summer level on record. That may not sound like beef's wild surge, but for families turning to pork as the cheaper option, it was a shock. The fallback protein no longer felt like much of a fallback. The reason is not as simple as one policy line. It is about the way tariffs ripple across the system. Start with feed. Hogs live on corn and soybeans, and both of those crops sit at the center of trade fights. Tariffs and global demand shifts raise feed costs, and feed is the single biggest expense in raising pork. When grain prices climb, the cost of every chop, every ham, every slice of bacon rises too. Then look outward. Pork is a global trade product. American producers rely heavily on exports, especially to China. In the past, when tariff battles erupted between Washington and Beijing, pork shipments swung wildly. Even today, the threat of new duties or restrictions keeps markets unsettled. A slowdown in exports means more pork on U.S. shelves at first, but it also means producers adjust herds contracts and prices. Those adjustments ripple through in ways shoppers eventually see at the checkout line. There is another twist. When beef and lamb become more expensive because of their own direct tariffs, many households and restaurants shift toward pork. That sudden demand can push prices higher, even without a single tariff on pork itself. It is the spillover effect. One product gets squeezed, the next one in line absorbs the shock. For the shopper, none of this looks like policy. It looks like a higher bill. The family that once swapped beef burgers for pulled pork sandwiches as a budget move now finds that pork is not much of a bargain either. The diner who loved a breakfast special with bacon notices a new surcharge. The deli customer who buys a ham sandwich twice a week watches the ticket creep upward. It feels unfair, and in a way it is. Shoppers did not ask for tariffs on Brazilian beef or Australian lamb. They did not decide on tighter border rules for cattle. But the system does not separate one meat from another. When the rules shift, the shockwaves move through the whole aisle. Pork just happened to stand in the path of those waves. Supporters of tariffs will say this is the price of keeping American producers afloat, of fighting for fair trade. Critics will say consumers are paying for battles they never chose. The truth is somewhere in between. Pork did not take the direct blow, but it carries the bruise all the same. And that is the point. Even when tariffs do not land squarely on a product, they can bend the market around it. They can turn the safe choice into another costly one. So, the next time someone tells you pork was untouched, remember this: indirect hits can still hurt just as much. Number 4. Turkey. Picture this. A mother pushing her cart down the aisle in November. A child tugging at her sleeve, the smell of cinnamon rolls from the bakery drifting through the store. She bends down to lift a turkey from the freezer, the bird that's supposed to crown the holiday table, and then she stops cold. The price stares back at her. It isn't what she remembers. It isn't even close. For many families, turkey isn't just another protein. It's a ritual. It's the centerpiece of Thanksgiving. The reason the tablecloth is pressed, the candles lit, and the folding chairs dragged out from the garage. When that one bird becomes harder to afford, the feeling cuts deeper than a number on a receipt. It feels like a piece of tradition is slipping away. Over the past year, shoppers have seen the turkey case turn into a guessing game. Prices climbing when demand peaks, discounts thinner than before, whispers of bird flu sweeping through farms again, with the Department of Agriculture pushing for stricter testing and even talking vaccines. Headlines about disrupted flocks, higher feed, tighter supply. The background noise is complicated, but the front line is simple: a frozen turkey that costs more than families expect, right when they need it most. You can hear it in conversations at checkout. A sigh from a grandfather remembering when he could pick up a whole bird for far less. A whisper from a young couple debating whether they can manage both the turkey and all the sides. Some families trade down to smaller birds, others settle for chicken or ham, and some wonder if they can even host it all. For food banks, the strain is visible too. Each November, donations fall short while demand climbs. Volunteers scramble to meet the need, knowing that a missing turkey means a missing piece of dignity at the table. Restaurants and caterers raise holiday prices, sometimes quietly trimming portions or swapping in alternatives, trying to hold on to customers without breaking the season spirit. This is where the emotional weight of turkey goes beyond economics. A roast turkey is more than protein. It's the centerpiece of a memory. It's kids sneaking crispy skin before the platter hits the table. It's grace spoken in a crowded room. It's neighbors dropping by with pie. To see that memory carry a heavier price tag each year feels like a betrayal of trust. Not from a person, not even from a single policy, but from a system that somehow lets tradition slip further out of reach. The background matters, of course. A global poultry market still unsettled by disease. Costs of keeping flocks safe that never stop rising. A supply chain stretched thinner each year. All of it adds weight to the price tag. But none of those bullet points soften the sting for families standing in front of the freezer, wondering if this year's holiday feast will look smaller, feel lighter, or be missing altogether. Some farmers argue the higher costs are necessary, that without them the turkeys wouldn't even make it to the shelves. And that's true. Without strong biosecurity, the shelves could be empty. Yet in the end, the responsibility lands in the same place. The shopper who carries the bird to the register pays the bill and feels the squeeze. That's why turkey holds such a unique place in the story. It's not eaten every day. It doesn't sit in the cart week after week like beef, pork, or chicken. It's reserved for moments that matter most. And when those moments are shaken by rising prices, the hurt lingers longer than any headline. So as families gather around the table, some with a smaller bird, some with none at all, one truth becomes clear. The weight of a turkey is not measured only in pounds. It's measured in memory and tradition, and in the quiet question no one wants to ask: how many more holidays before even this simple bird feels out of reach? Number 5. Veal. Beef is the hammer, heavy, blunt, and impossible to ignore. When it swings, it crashes through the household budget and leaves a mark everyone can see. Veal is different. It's smaller, quieter, sharper. A meat that was once a familiar sight on American tables but has now become almost hidden. And yet when the market shifts, veal cuts just as deep in ways that feel even more unsettling. The truth is that veal moves with beef. The same herds that supply steaks and burgers also decide the fate of cutlets and scallopine. When cattle numbers fall, calves grow scarce. When tariffs raise the floor under beef, imports veal feels the echo. The August numbers tell the story clearly. Beef and veal together rose nearly 14% over last year. But unlike beef, veal has no cushion of scale, no fallback in volume. A slight tremor in the system becomes a sharp stab at the price tag. That is what makes veal such a telling measure. It shows the vulnerability built into the system. Families cannot control the weather that shrinks pastures. They cannot control the tariffs written into trade deals. They cannot control border checks that slow the flow of cattle. And when those forces collide, veal, fragile niche, already rare, becomes the clearest sign of how powerless consumers truly are. For older Americans, this feels like more than numbers. Veal was once a common dish: veal parm at the local Italian place, veal chops on the Sunday table, veal cutlets tucked into church cookbooks. Now it is expensive, harder to find, sometimes not offered at all. That isn't just inflation. That's tradition slipping away. And it slips not with a crash, but with a quiet retreat that families can't stop. This sense of inevitability is what makes the veal story frightening. It reminds us that the market is not a fair fight. Shoppers don't get a vote when tariffs are announced or when herds shrink. They don't get to argue when prices at the wholesale level shift upward. They only see the end result stamped on the sticker in front of them. And in that moment, all the power feels gone. So what can be done? We can't control the waves of global trade, but we can steady our boats. For families who still want to keep veal or beef in the diet, the best step is to buy smart Watch Weekly ads. Stock up when a true sale appears and freeze for later. Consider smaller portions. A cutlet split into 2 plates with hearty sides still carries the tradition without doubling the cost. And don't overlook alternatives. Pork cutlets. Chicken parm or plant-based substitutes may never taste quite the same, but they stretch the budget while keeping the meal alive. The point isn't to give up, but to adapt. If the hammer is too heavy and the blade too sharp, then the best defense is flexibility. That means adjusting menus, stretching ingredients, and refusing to let the market steal the sense of gathering around the table. Because the scariest part isn't just losing a favorite meat, it's losing the memory tied to it. And if veal's quiet fade shows anything, it's this: once a tradition slips too far, it may never come back. And here's the real chill: if a smaller, fragile meat like veal can be swept aside so easily, what happens when the same forces keep grinding at the staples? If the sharp edge of the market can erase veal without a fight, nothing in the aisle is safe from being cut down next. Number 6. Chicken. If beef was the hammer and veal the blade, then chicken is the last shield. For decades, families leaned on it as the reliable fallback. When other meats climbed too high, chicken was there to steady the cart. But now even that shield is starting to crack. Chicken is the most eaten meat in America. It shows up in nuggets on a child's plate, grilled breasts in a lunchbox, drumsticks sizzling on a summer grill, fried pieces piled on the Sunday table. It's the anchor. It's the safe choice. And when the anchor drags, the whole ship feels it. The numbers don't sound explosive at first. Year over year, chicken prices have only edged up 1 or 2%, far less than the double-digit leaps of beef. Wholesale forecasts were even trimmed this year, hinting that the market might cool. But that small bump doesn't tell the real story. Because when beef, pork, lamb, and turkey all climb, every shopper turns toward chicken. Demand swells, deals shrink, and suddenly the fallback feels just as heavy as the rest. It's in the everyday habits where the shift shows. Parents once grabbed a family pack of chicken thighs without checking the tag. Now they pause, looking for the red sale sticker that isn't there. Restaurants that leaned on chicken sandwiches to keep menus affordable start adding surcharges. Food banks report more families asking for poultry, hoping it stretches further than pricier meats. The bird that once promised relief now whispers the same warning: nothing is safe anymore. The system explains part of it. Bird flu outbreaks that devastated egg markets also cast shadows over poultry. Feed and energy costs never really softened. Even modest tariffs on grains ripple into the price of raising broilers. Each link in the chain adds a few cents here, a few cents there. And by the time it reaches the store, the trusted cheap protein doesn't feel cheap at all. But the larger fear isn't the cents, it's the symbol. If chicken can no longer play the role of refuge, then the aisle loses its last line of defense. For generations, shoppers believed no matter what happened to beef or lamb, they could always count on chicken to hold steady. That belief kept dinner predictable, budgets manageable, and traditions intact. The slow erosion of that certainty cuts deeper than any sudden spike, and it cuts in silence. No screaming headlines, no shocking graphs. Just a steady creep that families notice only when they look at their receipts and wonder why the chicken casserole cost more than last time. The danger is in that quiet climb because it means the fallback is failing. Some will argue chicken still costs less than steak or chops, and they're right. But when every step of the ladder is rising, even the lowest rung leaves you hanging higher off the ground. That is the true risk here, not one dramatic surge, but the slow closing of every exit. So what happens when chicken, the shield of American kitchens, starts to give way? What happens when the final safe choice bends under the same weight that broke the others? The honest answer is unsettling. It means the system has cornered the consumer completely. No fallback, no refuge, no escape. And that's the darkest part of all. Not a single hammer blow, not a sharp stab, but the quiet realization that every path has been blocked. When even chicken falls, the aisle holds no safe harbor. The walls close in, and the family dinner table stands exposed. The picture is drawn now, and it isn't a pretty one. Beef slammed us, lamb slipped away, pork carried bruises, turkey betrayed tradition, veal faded in silence. And even chicken, the final shield, shows cracks. 6 meats, 6 warnings. Together they spell out something larger than a shopping list. What we are seeing isn't just food inflation, it's a system shifting under our feet. Policies written far away, diseases no one can predict, supply chains stretched thin. They all land in the same place, your dinner table. The writing is on the wall. Prices won't turn back overnight. So be careful, be watchful. Stay strong for the storm that is already building. It will not be easy. Not for you, not for me, not for any of us. But knowing the truth is the first step to bracing against it. Because the hardest storms aren't just about weather. They're about how we endure when the sky keeps darkening.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.